Again falls on South Africa's reintegration programs for foreign nationals impacted by last year's xenophobic violence. In KZN, a group living on the streets in the Durban city centre will be integrated back into their communities. That decision was taken during a meeting between the group and government. They had fled their homes during last year's xenophobic attacks. KwaZulu-Natal's provincial government says the majority of these displaced foreign nationals have already been reintegrated. To discuss the impact on xenophobia on the integration of migrants in SA, we have in studio Nomagugu Mlawe. She's an attorney with Lawyers for Human Rights in their refugee and migrant rights program. She joins us now from our Durban studios. Good afternoon, Nomagugu. Always a pleasure having you on the SABC News Desk.
Good afternoon, Kirshni. It's great to be back. Thank you for having me.
Noma, most of the foreign nationals impacted are back with the communities they actually fled from. What are some of the factors that will influence or drive a successful reintegration process?
When we speak of reintegration processes, I think in most people's minds, what comes to their mind is bringing in locals and non-nationals together to have discussions. But it is actually a multi-pronged process, and it goes beyond having locals and non-nationals in one room. We actually need to look at, are the discussions effective? Are the relevant stakeholders part of that discussion? Because what actually happens is that we need to underpin the actual underlying causes of xenophobia. We need to listen to the concerns, and in order to address those concerns properly, we need to have the relevant stakeholders in that room. It needs to go beyond just a discussion. We also need to have educative measures in place. Are we educating locals about non-nationals? Are we giving enough information to prevent misperceptions that actually lead to xenophobic attacks? So what we would say, Kirshni, as an organization, is that we welcome these social cohesion dialogues, but we need to move beyond just a discussion and actually put in place the multi-pronged processes that need to be there to accompany such discussions.
Nomagugu, let's quickly talk about that report by the Special Reference Group on Migration and Community Integration that came out very recently. Can you take us through the key findings of that report when it comes to identifying the causes of this particular spate of violence?
One of the key findings, and I think the most prominent finding, would be the fact that we actually need to align our institutions, our structures with our migration policy. Because without our institutions and structures being aligned with our migration policy, then we're actually creating a vulnerable pool and group of foreign nationals, which actually goes back to what causes xenophobia. And it actually goes back to my first point about education. Our own institutions, our own government institution, our own public services, are they educated about non-nationals in our country? Do the policies speak to non-nationals in our countries? Because for as long as those policies don't speak to the non-nationals in our countries, and for as long as our own institutions are not aligned, then we create vulnerable people, which then creates a breathing ground for xenophobia. So that was one of the highlights that came out of the reports, and also sensitizing communities, which also goes back to the first point. Are we having robust discussions about non-nationals? Do the people even know the different categories of non-nationals that we have in our country? Do the people know about your asylum seeker processes, your refugee processes? So those were the very two prominent points that actually need to be addressed effectively, and we need to see government institutions actually acting on those recommendations.
Nomagugu, to what extent is the volatility of this this situation being made worse or compounded by what we sometimes get in some communities, self-imposed leaders who want to take advantage, if you like, of gaps in current local government structures, and then they want to use this to advance their own personal agenda. We saw it happen back in 2008, and often these elements are working on the premise that they're better than a legitimately elected local councillors in the area, and second, that they will help get the community, get rid of foreigners, if you like. And with local government elections around the corner, all this taking on renewed impetus now.
Certainly, these individuals exacerbate the problem that we have on the ground regarding xenophobic sentiments in our South African communities. And the reason why these individuals actually find this platform is almost a silence from the authorities, a silence that may be intentional or that is not intentional. But because the voice from governments is so soft, then these individuals are able to have that loud voice, to again give misconceptions to societies, to make all these promises that are actually can't even be tangible. For instance, one cannot say that I will get rid of non-nationals if they knew what the legislation is, if they knew the policies in place. If the voice of governments was louder, then those individuals would not be in that position. So certainly, again, it goes back to our own governments and what stance are they taking, and is it robust and loud enough within the communities so these individuals cannot have this platform and cannot use such opportunities.
Thank you, Nomagugu. That was Nomagugu Mlawe, from an attorney with Lawyers for Human Rights, joining us from our Durban studios. Thank you so much for your time on the News Today desk. Moving on to